Hello, friends. We're going to talk a little bit more about Vasily Kandinsky. If you watched the cartoon video with Mati and Dada and you went on the adventure with them, you would have seen some of the paintings that he created. Vasily Kandinsky loved using music and listening to music when he painted. He felt that the colors that he used had music to them, as well as music depicted colors. So with this project, we are going to create a music man, kind of like the one that we saw in the cartoon with Mati and Dada, using simple lines and shapes. So pull out your crayons, and I would encourage you to listen to some music and use colors that kind of feel like the music that you're listening to. So if you're listening to really fast, happy music, you would maybe use brighter colors, like a yellow or a red or an orange. If it's slow, calm music, you might use a blue or a purple, whatever colors are calming to you, even a pink maybe. Everybody is going to see music differently or hear music differently. So if you close your eyes and listen to the music and you have a color that's kind of in your mind, use that color. So let me show you a picture of Vasily Kandinsky. This is what he looks like. He is from Russia. He painted abstract art. Sometimes you could see what he was painting, but usually you kind of interpreted it and your own way. So the first thing we're gonna do is, if you guys have music that you want to turn on, go ahead and turn on your music. I'm not gonna have music playing simply because I want you to be able to hear my voice. But I'm going to use a black crayon to do all of my outlining. So I'm going to draw a circle here. And I'm making the circle pretty big. It's filling the bottom half of my paper. If you want to trace something that is circular shaped, you can do that. I'm 100% okay with that, but you don't have to. It doesn't have to be a perfect circle. We are really just having fun. If we go back and look through a bunch of the paintings that Vasily Kandinsky created, you'll notice that he used a lot of different shapes and a lot of different lines. And sometimes those lines and shapes were very gestural. So it was almost like a feeling or emotion that he used to create that, because he was listening to music. So he may have been just using that feeling and that motion and not trying to make it perfect. All right, so I have my circle here. It's a great little circle. I'm gonna create a line on the side of my circle right there, and I'm not gonna, it's a wavy line, and it kind of starts at the side here, and I'm making sure that I'm putting a lot of pressure on these lines because I want them to be very dark and noticeable. All right, just like that. There we go. So that is a little bit of a wavy line. See that? Now up here, whoopsie, I have a crayon trying to run away. I'm going to use several straight lines, and I'm going to go straight down my paper from the top to the bottom, all the way from the top to the bottom of my paper. And I'm going to do another one right next to it. Those are like parallel lines. One of my students in class told me that his favorite lines were road lines. So they were the double lines on the road. And I asked him if he liked the dotted lines on the road too, and he said he did. He just liked them because they were on the road. So these are kind of like that type of line. If you like that type of line, you'll like this one. It doesn't have to be perfect, guys. If it's a little bit wobbly, that's gonna give your picture that much more character, and it's gonna be a really fun picture. So I'm gonna do one more line, And I am using a good amount of pressure. You can draw it lightly and then go right back over top of that line to make it a little bit darker. We want these to be really nice, visible lines. Now I'm gonna add a square. I'm gonna put a square up here near the top. Now I'm gonna tell you what this is that I'm drawing, or what this is gonna be representing as soon as I'm done drawing it, but not yet. So I have this beautiful abstract picture that doesn't really look like anything, and that is 100% okay. All right, so I'm going to draw some smaller circles over here. They actually look a little bit more like ovals. See that? And I'm going to draw some triangles right next to them. And they're not all exactly the same, and that's okay. See that? Then I'm going to come down here and I'm going to draw a rectangle. Make a rectangle here. And here. See that? All right, so I'm gonna leave this picture like this. There's not a lot of lines, it's very minimal, and that's okay. I'm gonna tap it to get some of those little crayon bits and pieces off. When I used a lot of pressure, some of the little small pieces of crayon wax broke off, and that's okay. So just clean my paper off really well. Now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna play around with some color. So this is when you really, really, really wanna listen to music. So right now, I've gotten all of my pieces drawn in here. You can draw yours. It doesn't have to look exactly like this. It can look different, but you do wanna use these shapes, and you can arrange them on your paper in a different way if you want to, that's fine. But let me tell you what I wanted to represent here. This is supposed to look like an abstract version of a guitar. So you have the body of the guitar, just the side of it right here. You have the hole that is in the center of the guitar. These, of course, are some of the strings. This would be the top of the guitar that holds the strings, and this would be the bottom rectangle that holds the strings as well. And these would be the little knobs that go on the strings to tighten or loosen them based on the note that you want to play. So this is a very, very, very simple representation of a guitar. Could even represent a ukulele. Really any kind of stringed instrument. Wasili like to see colors coming from different instruments based on the notes that they played, the tone that they had, if they were a low note or a high note. So if you want to get some music out, play your music, and you're going to throw some colors here into this picture based on what you hear. I'm going to go ahead and fast forward and throw some colors in here. Real quick before I do, what I do want to tell you is don't color the whole image in completely. We're going to do something afterwards. It's going to be a lot of fun, but I'm going to use this blue violet. And I'm not going all the way to the line. And there's a reason for that. But I am going to color in right here. And I'm going to make sure when I'm coloring that I'm creating a good amount of texture by using a lot of pressure. If you listen closely, you can hear my crayon. And that's because I'm applying pressure. Now, if you notice, I have a few little white spaces that are visible there. Normally, I would tell you you need to color it in neatly and color it in completely. However, for this project, it's okay if there's a little bit of white space visible. I'm gonna do blue-violet on this side as well. Again, not going all the way to that black line that I drew. I wanna leave a little bit of space where the paper can peek through. Same here. Now, this is one of the few times that I'll tell you, if you have a little bit of white space visible, that's okay. This is a little more white space than I prefer. I do want you to color it in a little bit more than that. And you want to use a good amount of pressure so that you have a nice thick layer of crayon wax down. So much so that when you rub it with your fingers, it feels velvety, all right? Now, I'm gonna go ahead and put this on fast forward. I'm gonna add a few more colors throughout the picture. Remember to make sure you keep a little white border. You want to have the white from the paper peeking through around the edges. You don't necessarily want to touch the black lines that you drew with your color. And there is a reason for that I'm going to show you in just a little bit. All right, friends, so I have my color put in. Again, this is very minimal. I don't have a ton of color in. That is okay. That's kind of the point. So if you look right here, you'll notice that I did orange on the outside of these triangles instead of on the inside. They're a little small, and the tip of my orange crayon is pretty thick. I didn't sharpen it, so I didn't have a sharp enough point to go inside without smearing my black lines. And I didn't want to smear my black lines. I want them to be nice and crisp, and I don't want them to mix in with my colors too much. I also took that orange color and kind of created a rectangle to mirror this rectangle that I colored in orange down here. I did the same thing with a light green by my green square. I also took a blue-green and kind of did an outline on the outside of my circle that I colored in with a blue-violet. And then this is violet here. So I just used some colors that I love, colors that I tend to see or that tend to calm, that make me feel calm when I'm listening to most stringed instruments. Any music by stringed instruments I love. They're just very soothing, relaxing, and calming for me. They also make me very happy. So these are colors that reflect that. These are colors that I would probably see floating through my mind when my eyes are closed listening to music using those instruments. So now that I have this done, I have another piece of paper that is under this paper. And the reason I did that is because this is printer paper. It's pretty thin, and I'm getting ready to wet my printer paper. So I want to have another paper underneath. That is also one of the reasons why I wanted you to use a lot of pressure with the crayon, because adding a lot of crayon wax and making it nice and thick is going to add weight to this paper. It's going to help make it a little bit more stable when we add water to it, so it doesn't rip as easily. Your hand will probably get tired when you are coloring and adding pressure. Mine did, and this is all the color I have on here, but it does get a little tired because I was gripping really tight. That's normal. If your hand gets tired, just take a break, and you can always go back to it later. So I have markers, and I'm actually gonna grab my blue marker. And the reason I'm grabbing blue is because blue is a color that is very soothing to me. I love blue. Blues and greens are colors that make me happy, that calm and relax me. So I'm gonna use this blue. This blue also looks really good with these purples and this blue and this green. And orange is gonna pop right off of that page. So those are gonna be my happy spots that are gonna just pop right off the page from this blue. Now, what I'm gonna do, I'm not gonna color over top of my crayons with the markers. This you will probably remember from some of our other projects. When we did the baby fox, we actually outlined over top of the crayon. We're not gonna do that this time. We're just gonna go around it a lot like we did here with this crayon. Now I am gonna color with the broad tip side of my marker, and I'm gonna go around in these larger areas right here. Again, this doesn't have to be done completely because we are going to wet this with water and turn it into paint. The reason I use the markers to create watercolor paints is because I'm not sure how many of you guys have them, but I also feel like my colors are just a little bit brighter with my markers when I turn those into paint than they are with watercolor palettes. There are certain brands of watercolor palettes that you can get that work really well, but I don't know how many of you have the ability to get out and get those without your parents' help. And I also haven't gone out and done any investigating on where the best place to get them is for the best price. So until I do that, we're gonna go ahead and use these markers because these markers do exactly what I want them to do, and they do it well. And it's kind of fun. So that's the other reason I do it this way. It's also just a little bit less messy. And since I do art on the cart a lot, this just helps me use a paint that's not messy. You can find paint pens that have more of a paintbrush type tip than markers, which are pretty cool to use too, and Crayola actually does make them. But they look very similar to what we're doing here. So I'm just gonna do a very thin line here. A very thin line here and here. Now this is not exactly the same as the little music man in the Mati and Dada cartoon because he was white and black, and I think there may have been a little bit of gray if I am remembering correctly. And we have color in here, and the reason we have color is because that is a big thing for Kandinsky. He loves his color, and music represents color. So I definitely wanted to get some good color in here. So I'm going to put my blue crayon to the side. I'm going to actually use a paintbrush when I'm painting this, and I'm going to get my paintbrush and just kind of spread it across my paper. I'm going to get some paper towels to place under this because I do have a lot of marker on here. It's going to bleed a little bit, but I'm going to do that part of the process on fast forward, so I'm not going to have my voice on that part of the process. All right, so now that I have painted my paper, you'll notice that I have some lighter areas and some darker areas. That's a part of the appeal to this. I love that there are some areas that are much darker than other areas, and that's just because of how thin I spread my my marker areas. So if I put more water to it to spread it farther, that's why this is lighter than this. A neat thing here that I want to show you is because I have this extra paper underneath, when I lift it off, some of that marker has bled through, and I can use this as a really fun extra piece of paper that I can create fun little designs around some of these little marker paint spots that are on that underneath paper. Be careful when you are painting that you don't press down too hard, because this paper, when it gets wet, does get very soft, and if you use too much pressure when you're painting, it could rip the paper. It's fixable if that happens, but since I'm not with you to be able to help you fix it, just try to be careful that you don't put too much pressure on the paper when you're painting, trying to move the marker around. Look at how bright this orange is. That's because orange and blue are complementary colors. So this blue background paint just makes that orange pop off the page. So those are my happy notes. I love it. I hope that you have fun with this project. I cannot wait to see your pictures that you send me. Have a great day, guys.